Thank you all for joining. We've got a great presentation coming up here, and I say that because we've got one of our top customers, and Dan Woicke here from Cerner Corporation, and the title is Shifting from Contributing to Outcome-Based Analytics. My name is Jeff Healy. I lead the Vertica marketing team. I'm going to spend just a few moments, because the session is brought to you by Vertica, provide a little overview on Vertica, a little bit around our positioning, competitive differentiation, cover a few of the analytical use cases that we can address with Vertica and do that with our customers. Then I'm going to pass it off to Dan, and we will leave time for some questions. So just quickly, what is Vertica? It's an organization within Micro Focus, and it's also a very well-adopted platform that's a unified analytics warehouse. I'm going to talk about that in just one moment, but a lot of the customers and prospects we speak to, they say, is Vertica a database? What's the underlying database? Does ML? It does all those things. It's three things. It's a SQL relational analytical database. So just with all relational databases, particularly MPP analytical data warehouses, you can store and manage very large volumes of data, petabytes of data in Vertica, and you get very fast performance. It's also an analytics and machine learning platform. And we take a more of an in-database machine learning approach, but there are a lot of advanced analytical functions, machine learning algorithms to address every step of the predictive analytics process. That's really differentiating for us. And we also have opened it up to all the data scientists out there that are using R and Python and all their favorite languages to use technologies like PMML. If you want to do model import into Vertica to do scoring on the full corpus of data, what we say is if you build your models more robust on the highest data volumes, you're going to get more accuracy. And then it's also query engine. So we understand there are a lot of organizations out there. Dan may talk a little bit about it, where you also have a data lake with your incumbent data warehouse, and you want to be able to query that data in place without copying or moving the data. I hear that a lot from different organizations. We're not a company or a product that says you need to put all your data in one place. You can analyze that data in place with the query engine, whether that's Oracle Parquet data, Avro data, complex data types, within HDFS or S3. So a little bit about Vertica. Talked about Unified Analytics Warehouse. What does that mean? So if you speak with a lot of the analysts and media community, and then also a lot of organizations, chances are there's a data warehouse and a data lake. And for some time, there was a real battle going on, particularly between the open source kind of offerings out there and a lot of kind of traditional enterprise data warehouses, this convergence of the two. But we're taking an approach from the data warehouse side where you get the high performance, the high concurrency, and having great hooks into the data lake, being able to, again, support those complex data types, or no matter where the data is stored, be able to read that data in place. What we're focusing on is less on the data and more on the analytics. And what that means is that your data consumers, or the people in the organization that are providing the insight to everyone else, and that's the data scientists and the data analysts, whether you want to take a complete SQL-based approach as a data analyst, you can do that through integration with Tableau and Looker and all those BI data visualization tools. Or if you're a data scientist and you want to use the tools that you've grown to love, Python, R, using Jupyter notebooks, you can do that as well. So it's about unifying the analytics so that you have more options. It's the best tool for the job type of approach, and leaves your options open in the future so you don't get locked in. Lastly, I'll say before I hand it off to Dan, is really our spotlight customer, is that the easiest way to describe Vertica's customers, thousands of them, and what they're doing is how they're addressing their analytical workloads. This is a very popular slide around the day in the life, and that's everything from the trade desk around ad tech analytics, one of the largest data analytical warehouses on Amazon with multi-petabyte clusters, to Uber around ride sharing, being able to do those calculations to determine how to charge for, say, surge pricing and things like that. Customer analytics around guests, whether that's brick and mortar or online. IoT analytical workloads are addressed really well with Vertica, from Philips around predictive maintenance, or Hewlett Packard Enterprise as part of their kind of embedded analytical initiatives, to Intuit for software optimization. There was a whole list of case studies. It's all deriving more insight from larger data volumes with Vertica. I encourage everyone to go to the website and learn more about those. But without further ado, I want to pass it off now to Dan, so Dan can dive into Cerner and talk about outcome-based analytics. Dan, you want to take from here?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. My name is Dan Woicke, as Jeff has already introduced me. I'm a senior director at Cerner Corporation, and we're headquartered out of Kansas City. I work in an organization called Cerner Works. And what Cerner Works is is our hosting facility. So about 75% of our clients now choose to host their physical software inside one of our two Kansas City location data centers. The other 25% continues to do a very good job at operating their EMR at their own data centers. We have about 29 to 30,000 associates, 27,500 provider facilities, and that's in over 35 countries today. We are a $5.4 billion company and continue to grow. Go ahead, Jeff. The reason why we're going to go through some of the slides today, I'm going to go very fast through these because I do want to leave some time for Q&A. The interesting thing about Cerner is that we have 3 different independent platforms, and so you can imagine some of you that do have a broad range of platforms, how difficult that is to do things one way and be successful at it. So I'm going to show you an architecture that we built, which is kind of very, very open and allows us to take different platforms, different technologies, and be able to perform real-time monitoring on there. As Jeff has alluded, the whole demo today and the whole talk today is about moving away from operational metrics to more of the user-based metrics. And so let me just define what I personally believe that is, and I think most of you will be able to relate to what I'm saying. Operational metrics in the past used to be those very bare things that people got very good at: your CPU, your memory-based metrics, how full is your disk, what is the latency on your network. And we still do all that stuff at Cerner because it's so important. But what it lacks is the insight into what an actual doctor or nurse is doing on one of our platforms. And so where the disk could be 99% full, people could still be very happy, but we still need to monitor the 99% full because we're going to get on top of that before 2 minutes later, everybody goes unhappy. So we're going to talk about user-based metrics versus operational metrics. Go ahead, Jeff. So here's kind of one of my slides in here. Yeah, I wanted to put really flashy up top. So data ingestion, Jeff talked about the number of petabytes that Vertica is able to ingest in very short periods of time. And then, of course, if you're going to ingest it, you've got to use it. So it's got to be fast to bring it back out again. So yeah, we do ingest 1 billion rows of operational data. So some of those per hour, right? And some of those things that I was talking about earlier is the base operating system type metrics. And then our main platform that you showed in the previous slide is called Millennium. That's our traditional EMR, where if you go and see your doctor or nurse, they're actually asking you questions. Are you allergic to anything? They put the orders within there. They're doing their charting within that system. And so obviously there's some very proprietary things there that we have to also collect and monitor. Then we want to go to the wire and it's network latency. We do SAN storage, so we want to make sure that's being efficient. I'm going to show you an example there. We've got thousands and thousands of network switches. And then I'm going to hit package installs, which would be our software installs. And then, of course, service request data. So our clients calling into our help desk and asking about certain things, or performance problems, or even outage type issues. So the one there I should probably put in the middle is kind of our most famous. It's called RTMS. It's Response Time Measurement System. So when I say we're going away from operational system parameters into user-based, this is a perfect definition of what a user experience measurement is. So what we've done within our Millennium code and our 2 other platforms, we put in over 3,000 of these RTMS timers. So we've taught the engineers how to put simple checkpoints. So am I opening a chart? When did it actually go to the database, bring the information back, and present the screen back to the end user? We would call that one RTMS timer. We try to pride ourselves in having every RTMS timer that's user-based come back in 2 seconds or less. So there's 2.5 billion of these rows that come back every single day from all these clients around the world. And we analyze every single one of them in real time. And I'm going to show you how we actually do that in the upcoming slides. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we do have a 30-minute presentation. But I do want to emphasize we do have a very strong ingestion framework. So out of all the different platforms on the blue on the left-hand side, I was talking about Millennium a second ago, these 1 billion rows of data are coming in through our Hadoop infrastructure, laying into Hadoop, and then they get batched into Vertica. And then that's kind of where the magic happens. So we're doing correlation in Vertica. We're bringing the data out and putting it into a real-time ingestion engine. And we're trying to look at those anomalies that we discovered. So RTMS timers, are they climbing? Do we have network issues? do I have an actual user that the application crashed on them? And then we can send that off to our IRC, which is our help desk. And then I won't get into it for this presentation because it would take an hour on its own. We have this amazing system called the Lights On Network, and we give it to all of our clients for free. It's a web-based system where you can come in and see these metrics, not only in real time, but compare yourself over a long period of time. And then the other cool thing you can do is, like, if you have a client that's a like size of another client, you can go in there and see blinded comparisons to say, hey, why are we 3 seconds slower on opening a chart when client over here in Nebraska is 3 seconds faster? You start asking those questions, and Cerner gets involved in trying to rectify some of those things. Big architecture here. I can talk about this slide probably for another 10-minute hour, but the massive ingestion platform framework, and the thing I want to emphasize here, it batches continuously into Vertica at the rate of 1 billion rows of this operational data per hour. Go ahead, Jeff. Okay, one of the programs that we launched a couple years ago is called Performance Abnormality Flags. We walk around the office, which none of us are right now, they call them PAFs. So we don't want a PAF to happen at any client, because through some of the data scientist work that we did with the data in Vertica, we can tell when things are deviating in a negative fashion for performance. So I'm going to show you an example of a PAF on the next slide. So this is your RTMS timers. The mountain in the back that's gray indicates the number of clients or users that are on the system. So you can see people coming in, roughly 8 o'clock in the morning, going to lunch right there in the middle, coming back, and then leaving for the day. So I'm going to guess that little red ugliness right there is probably going to be somewhere around, 11 o'clock a.m., but it's not important. The blue line is your nominal one. The red line, you can completely see that the average transaction response time used to be about 0.5 seconds, and it's skyrocketed to 3. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're looking at these averages, what's really happened, you still have a lot of 0.5s, but you might have a lot of 15s, 30s. And believe me, if you've ever seen a doctor's face when they're trying to wait for a chart or an order to come back in 30 seconds, it's not a good sign. So if you continue on, Jeff, I'm going to show you how we take more data to analyze exactly what's happening to this particular user experience. So I'm not a DBA, but I do know quite a bit about databases. So you can see during the exact same 30 minutes, we had a bunch of log file syncing going on. And so what that means is that we're not able to write to the disk faster than the data coming in that needs to be written to the disk. So drilling down to the next stack, Jeff, I can see that we're also at the same exact time. Now, the time is a little bit skewed off, but believe me, it's the same exact time. We see messages here that are being queued. And when I talk about a message, so let's say the doctor does put all that information on what we call the scratch pad, and then wants to go and sign that order, whether it be for x-rays or medications. They actually have to wait for that transaction to go from the Citrix server to the app tier to the database and all the way back. The RTMS timer does calculate that entire round trip, but if I dig deeper here, I can see that which exact services are queuing and at what time. And I can also see that some of the messages are actually expiring here. So that's even worse than having a doctor wait for a transaction to come back, because these expired messages will have to be re-executed. So if I put 3 things on a scratch pad and signed it for an order, I'm going to be very, very frustrated to add those 3 items back on and resubmit that transaction. So I'm still not at root cause yet, but I've got a ton of information about what's going on. So if we go to the next slide, you can see here, there's 3 lines. The first and the third are different SAN instances. They look fine. It's the amount of traffic coming in is the gray, and the latency rate are the other colored lines. But the one in the middle sure strikes me hard. I guess I do have 4 lines on there, which is fine. But the one that in the middle really strikes me hard, because I'm not asking that SAN to do much, but it served during that same period of time, and it looks exactly the same. It's giving me a ton of latency. So now I'm getting really, really close to where the problem is. Based on that user experience, I know I've got happy, frowning users, drilling down out of the technical stacks, which are still important. Now I'm going to drill one more step in. Go ahead, Jeff. I think you might be a double click. Go ahead. Yep. I just wanted to zoom in there and show you that there's tons of latency. There's no I/O requirements. All right. Continue. All right, and here is the bread and butter right here. These are the 3 different clients that are using the exact same piece of network equipment, the SAN array. And you can see that 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 are being hit with lots of latency, but there's no I/O rates going through those systems. On line 4, I can tell now that there's one person client, system accounts, program is doing something requiring a ton of I/O, which is causing the latency across that shared piece of device. All right. So now I've got probably what I need because I blinded out what client this was. Now I can go onto that system, and we found out during this example that they were doing a full, and I don't mean a partial, but I mean a full Oracle backup of the entire EMR during the middle of the day. So what would have taken us probably 2 to 5 hours to figure this out, because we would have to go out and page every client that was affected, right? Some of these clients probably didn't even call in. They were getting ready to call in, so we beat them to it, which is good. Right. We had to page out the Citrix team, the database team, the app server team, the Windows team, and then everybody would do separate investigations. And none of this data that sits in Vertica together would have ever been correlated to know that this is happening at the same time. This is how our game has really changed when it comes to using user experience data with traditional operational data in order to quickly get down into root cause. So this is a really, there's hundreds and hundreds of these success stories, but the key is that it definitely lowers our mean time to resolution, and it keeps that phone from ringing. We can get on top of this stuff before a client really starts to understand what's happening or feel it. All right, go ahead, Jeff. And go ahead again. We already zoomed into that one. All right, so now where are we going now? We are going into some more of the Google site reliability engineering concepts, and really making and forcing all of our service owners to define service level indicators. So the most popular would be, is there any latency on the system? So RTMS would be a good example of that. Am I getting any errors? So if it's a web page, am I getting a non-200? Because I know that if a client's getting a non-200, that is a user experience metric, and that transaction will have to be done again. Saturations, data quality, anything that's user impact related would be a service level indicator. And then the objectives are, over time, can I maintain a level of service so that I have more smiling faces per minute than I do friends? And then, of course, your SLA is how you pass that along to the client. And you guarantee what quality of service you're going to deliver to those clients. And the SLAs, of course, the SLOs better be a little bit more stringent than your SLAs, because if we're going to hit an SLO, I want to tell my team about it so we can fix it before it violates the agreement that we made with the client. So these are the concepts here that we're using to build a second system called CORE. It's Cerner's observability framework. So next slide. And many of you are going to recognize something like this when I explain what's really going on. This is just one of the platforms that my team owns, and I'm not going to talk about any of these circles or ovals, but you can see how a service in one area or one data center starts to have to be a dependency on other services. So it gets entirely complex. So we're building a platform called CORE that flattens out all of these dependencies. And so if I know that COPE is down at the top, I'm sorry, not COPE is down, but if OAuth is down at the bottom, then I can understand every single service that's going to be affected from that. Today, we don't do a really good job of that. It's more research when OAuth goes down, who's calling in, and what of those other monitoring systems are picking up anomalies. So this is the system we're building now, and I just got a few screenshots of it. It's going into production at the beginning of October. So go ahead. Okay, so this is CORE. The top line is your SLI. So I always talk about happy faces and frowns, because not everybody's going to be happy every minute, but I want an overwhelming majority. So when I talk about my service level indicators and objectives, my objective is over a 5-minute period of time, I want 99.99% of the transactions to be under 2 seconds. And so you can see the little dashed lines there. I got like 3 Morse code lines right there. You can tell, like, during those periods of time, I was violating my service level objective. And then on the same page, similar to what I showed you on that PAF example, now I can start going through the stacks and figure out what are the contributors to those unhappy frowns. And there are 4 major user experience metrics that we monitor today. So we've been talking a ton about RTMS, which is the response timers. We have what's called an RTT, or it's the response time transaction. So RTMS only takes you from the Citrix server through the app tier, the database, and back to the Citrix server. RTT gives you from the end user device, whether it be a desktop or an iPad or your phone, and then that's the round trip to the Citrix session and back. So basically, is it the client's network problem? Because that's half of that's not in the Cerner data center, right? You've got to get to the Cerner data center, and I need to be able to measure that and see if that might be a problem. And then unfortunately, we have crashes, which are getting fewer and fewer. But if I'm going to, and especially a Windows application, and it crashes, I've got to restart the whole thing. A huge frown, right? And then the third one is application hangs. So those are the things that maybe as a contributor based on your PC that you're on. Maybe it's underpowered, and you know how you get that little annoying hourglass in the middle of the screen. That's what we call an application hang, and we're able to measure how long those hangs happen. And then you also get those annoying, like when you're typing in the keystrokes or falling behind, or your mouse is lagging a little bit. That would be an application hang. So those are our 4 main user experience metrics that will go and are going into core as SLIs in order to determine outcomes. And I'm not sure if I have any more here, Jeff. We're doing really good on time. Yeah. And then the next thing we want to do is if you've ever read the book, this Site Reliability Engineering from Google, I highly, highly recommend it. It's a good read, and it talks about how Google has introduced some of these concepts. And one of them is a step down. So if I say that I'm going to provide 99.99% and meet my SLO over a defined period of time, every time if you add that up over a month, I believe that's 44 minutes, if I'm correct. And so every time I burn my SLO for a minute, I'm going to burn down until it gets to 0. Now, the thing that the book teaches you to do here is, as an engineering manager, you can do some pretty cool things. So you can say, hey, listen, the slope of this line is going down faster, and it's going to hit 0 before the 31st of the month. So you could take a time out and say, what I'm going to do right now is not put any enhancements into the system. I'm going to freeze the system, and I'm going to take my engineering cycles to go and to do stability projects, to try to flatten that line, to try to meet that overall SLO over the entire month. And so on the same screenshot here, that I can go back and see what were the major contributing minutes and some of the things at an SLI level that were contributing to those bad minutes. All right. So Jeff, it is. I know we had to go fast. We have 30 minutes.
Yeah, right on. Dan, great presentation. Want to kick it off into any questions coming our way. I just want to give a quick plug for this ebook. Dan and Cerner are featured in it. Again, more information around all the work that Dan and Cerner are doing, as well as some other pretty interesting stories around Vertica human interest stories. Of course, Cerner is not just an IT company, but also a healthcare technology company. So even more so than meeting SLAs and helping move the needle on the business, making a difference in the world. So if you're going to plug that, and then lead in the Q&A if we have any questions coming through. Otherwise, Dan and I can continue the conversation here. All right. Well, as people kind of get their questions together, posing them, Dan, maybe we could chat and talk a little bit more about this outcome-based analytics. Maybe sharing. Anytime you go to a conference, it's always, what do you come away with? Maybe 2 or 3 takeaways for every event. And I think your approach has been good as far as talking about outcomes. If you could share a little bit about what are the things that surprised you the most when you dug into the analytics that help with the business.
I think that the most surprising factor, I kind of alluded to it a little bit, is like you can have no alarms or no events being shot into your help desk, and you could still have what I call squeaky wheel users, right? So they're say 5,000 users are on a system at one particular period of time. All your metrics, say you had 300 different parameters for operational metrics, and none of them have crossed their threshold. Out of those 5,000 users, you could still have 100 users that are very, very upset with the system, but overall, you're not seeing it because you don't have anything to act on. So now that we understand, we can get in all the way down to the lowest end user, that's kind of flipped the whole coin, right? And now we can go after those 100 users in those situations that have, and then look at the parameters and correlation and say, hey, what's coming close to violating their threshold, right? And start flipping it around and looking at it that way. That was the most surprising thing, because we knew we always had clients calling in, but they're like, we're looking at the system. We've got all our best engineers on all those systems and everything looks good. But the numbers don't lie, right? If we have RTMS timers that are climbing up to 20 seconds for a particular user, you can't dispute the fact that that user is having a bad situation.
No, that's good guidance. And Dan, I'm sure there's many people on the line with organizations that are doing maybe a little bit more science experiments with analytics or machine learning. How did you get to this point? I know this has been a journey. Obviously, we've been working together for some time, but you didn't ultimately get to, hey, we're going to base our your whole team or your analytics mission designed around SLAs and SLIs and SLOs. What did it take to get to each of those steps, and maybe some lessons learned there for people that are just getting started?
Sure. No, we did employ some data scientists, and I think that was that was a good step, because they're trained in some of the mathematics and algorithm creations that maybe some of my software engineers weren't able to do. And that's really how the whole PAF program got developed, in our correlation between network deficiencies and slow mouse movements. And then it took a lot of work to perfect those algorithms, because what you don't want to do is send too much information to your data center, because if it's not actionable, like if I send 100 different events to my data center within 5 minutes, I don't have enough people working in that data center that are going to hit all of it. Then you start tuning it. And so I think that's the slow climb that you get. You graduate to a point where you're like, I'm putting in the right number of events, they're being all acted on, and we're slowly can see that the outcome data is showing improvement. And then we built that service resiliency program where if any particular service violates their SLOs over a period of time, you have to go on what's called a get green plan, and they have to show exactly what projects they're going to put in place in order to come off that get green plan. The only way you get off the get green plan is to show over a continuous period of time that you've maintained your service level objective. So that resiliency program has been a big help at Cerner as well.
Makes sense. And separating the signal from the noise, right? When to flood your data center with all this data where you're really just trying to kind of get a laser focus in the area you want to drill into more. That's good. We got one question, Dan, just the reference to the Google book that you mentioned. That's the one question we have. I figure if you can give that name of that, I'm sure this.
Sorry, book is site reliability engineering.
Site reliability engineering. Okay, cool.
If you go to Amazon and you hit Google and SRE, it'll be the first book that comes out.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really good to hear you talk about your use case and how you build it up, because there are so many organizations that are not at a level of analytical maturity to be able to use advanced analytics. Their data operations and their data pipelines are not in a place where you can, to your point, respond to things that are truly actionable, or even identify things that are actionable. So I'm looking forward to digging into more of the white paper that is part of what you mentioned. Incidentally, we use Vertica as an application database, and we are talking to them, I think it's tomorrow, to talk through. We are also in the process of revamping, or at least formulating our data strategy for our organization for the next 3 years. And it's part of a larger conversation about what we need to do and how are we going to approach it. And it's, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
That's great. I think, like you said, it's one step at a time. I mean, we failed a lot too. But it's a slow process, and it didn't take months. It took years to get there.
Yes.
Vertica, we've had Vertica for I believe 7 years now. And because the story I didn't tell was, before we had Vertica, all we did is summarize these timers. So the same number of timers were coming in, but all we could do is say, oh, for this particular timer, the chart open, it happened 5,384 times, and the average of it was 3.2. and the 97th percentile was this, but then you couldn't tell, like, was it the same doctors, was it the same nurses? You had no insight. So now that you have discrete rows and something that you're able to put those discrete rows into, you can start taking the steps like you're talking about. And then my email address is down there in the corner too. So if you ever just feel like, hey, I got a question about what you guys did, I'd be more than happy to return your email.
I would love that, because I know we are going to run into situations. We've already run into situations. We clearly know this is something that we need to undertake. So I think we are at that point. We have the executive buy-in to commit to it for the next 3 years. So we're sort of really further ahead than when in my lifetime at this place. And thank you. I would be reaching out to you, I'm sure, with more.
That's great. Excellent.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for joining. I know we've hit the top. I've got a note that we need to wrap up. But Dan, I want to give a huge thanks to you. Great presentation. Love the interaction. Really appreciate it. Hopefully everyone has a good rest of the show, and contact information is here. If you need to reach out, please do. We encourage it. And thanks again. Have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.